Yeah, the fact that you haven't heard of this and this is something you care about is like, it says a lot more about just like the kind of like the superficial and full of shit nature of a lot of these influencers that are like justice for the come on, if you're gonna really care about these victims, then be consistent across the board. And when somebody that was within our own circle who you respected, like Bannon, who was also one of the people being like, release the Epstein Files, and he comes out and he's incriminated by this, and the fact that you're silent about it, I think that says a lot more about you and your character than it does about like the Mossad.
So Karys Rhea, you work for Karys Rhea. Sorry. Okay. You used to work for the Epoch Times. Is that? Yeah. So what did you do with them?
I produced their flagship show, American Thought Leaders.
Okay.
With Yanya Kellick.
Right.
He was the host and executive producer, and then for a while I also produced Dr. Robert Malone's show.
Oh.
We had a show with him for about a season, and then I also produced Kash Patel's show for maybe a year or something before he. Went on the campaign
and
trail
now he's the FBI
them.
director.
Yeah.
What a wild fucking administration this is.
I know.
This is like I kind of like.
Net.
In
terms of net
look
positives or net negatives, are you like, yeah, good, yeah, bad?
I'll put it to you this way. I think overall it's a positive thing because you're realizing that like there's nothing like I said this to Shank when I did Young Turks, and I said after 4 years you're going to realize that Donald Trump is like not a savior but also not a dictator, and you're kind of realizing like firsthand that he's just another president, and like the martyrdom
well, yeah, that's
like
true.
the martyrdom
That's
and the
true.
hero worship is not going to exist anymore, and the whole idea
that's
of him
already
being a fascist,
died down.
yeah, and the whole idea of him being a fascist and a dictator is just
That's
like
not gonna,
obviously not happening.
For sure. But I think he's trying to get a lot of stuff done. I just think that it's really, it's a massive undertaking what he's trying to do. There's no way he's going to do it all. Like not even
it's
close,
impossible.
but
It's impossible to
impossible.
do, and I think that the problem, what's happened with Trump, is that like you're cursed with the burden of unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, for sure.
And also the way he's handled these expectations has just been a disaster so far.
With
With Epstein. I think with the Epstein stuff, is like, and you have
he dropped the ball on Epstein, but now, right? I think it's turning around, right? I mean, he was like, "Go, fine, like release everything." So they did one sort of dump, right? And then
I don't even know what's going on with that.
Yeah, they did a dump, and like, dun dun dun, who was in the files?
Who was?
None
Tell me,
other
'cause
than Mr. Stephen Bannon.
Oh, I believe it.
Who has been like such a massive disappointment for me as somebody who was like a fan of him previously, who just like flipped and went on the like anti-Zionist grift after the 12-day war.
But I thought that like Jeffrey Epstein was like a Zionist agent working for the Jews.
Oh
That's
my
what I
God,
thought.
don't you know? Because like his sister's brother was friends with the Hood.
What's also
the
crazy?
former
What's also
prime minister,
crazy is though,
and there was a Syrian passport, but the Syrian passport seemed like it was written
this is
by
a lot. But okay, what's and look, I think that he definitely worked for. He definitely probably did some work for some of these Israeli intelligence agencies, but he also did work for every single intelligence agency.
I don't know why we think he did work for them. Like, why isn't it enough that he was just connected to all these wealthy people, and that included Israeli elites, like the former leftist prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak?
Yes, so he was connected to people in that government.
But like, there's no evidence. There's not even circumstantial evidence. There's just like one guy being like, who like took back his testimony or something. That was like, yeah, I think he worked for Mossad. There's nothing credible there.
So,
and let me just say that nobody who works for Mossad would go around wearing a Mossad T-shirt, which Jeffrey Epstein did.
Maybe that's part of like the ultra covert operation.
Right, it's like the extra.
Yeah, it's like hiding in plain sight,
right.
like the most Illuminati thing you could do.
Right.
But also, it's also like, hey, we're gonna like create the ultimate Jewish spy, and we're gonna name him like Jewenstein David Katzenberg, and it's like you're giving him like you got the guy with the most Jewish last name to work as a spy for Mossad.
Well,
it just seems a little preposterous. But
sure.
But I think the reason people have equated him
Robert Maxwell,
because of Robert Maxwell, he multiple
tie,
documentations
so
has said that like he built back doors for the Israeli government to spy on different people.
But why
and then
does
Ghislaine Maxwell
that-
was his daughter, and he worked
Totally.
alongside Ghislaine Maxwell to do this global sex trafficking honeypot operation. So because of that, I could understand why people are suspicious of Epstein's ties to Israel.
You can be suspicious, but to be like he worked for Mossad, like. No, there's a lot of associations like that, like you said, with other intelligence agencies too, and not just the CIA, like others as well, including I heard some. Don't quote me on this, but I heard something about the UK or something. Like
MI6, yeah.
So I mean, like, I don't know. I think what's more telling is I think what's more revealing in this whole Epstein balagan most recently is that all these people that have been freaking out about Epstein don't seem to be bothered by the fact that Bannon and Epstein were exchanging text messages that are incredibly cringe and incriminating.
What were the Can you tell me?
After Jeffrey Epstein's like first indictment, and it was Bannon trying to help like do PR for Epstein and try to like clean up his image as like a pedophile or like like a sex trafficker or something. Yeah, the fact that you haven't heard of this and this is something you care about is like it says a lot more about just like the kind of like the superficial and full of shit nature of a lot of these influencers that are like justice for the come on, if you're gonna really care about these victims, then be consistent across the board. And when somebody that was within our own circle who you respected, like Bannon, who was also one of the people being like, release the Epstein Files, and he comes out and he's incriminated by this, and the fact that you're silent about it, I think that says a lot more about you and your character than it does about like the Mossad.
Well,
like Israel.
Sure. Can you tell me like what specifically? Do you have any specific examples of what he said? Or,
but like you can read. I mean, you can read all of the text messages.
Okay.
I read them once. It was right when it came out a couple weeks ago, and I cannot quote you, the actual text messages because I'm bound to get something wrong. I don't have that type of memory. Sure. But I can tell you that the conversation consisted of how Bannon could help Epstein with his, declining reputation as a result of these scandals, these sex scandals that he was involved in. And that he had already been indicted
and
for.
this was like after his first arrest?
Yeah.
In 2007 or 6 or something, he was
that.
communicating with Epstein about this.
It was after that.
Wow.
I think it was substantially after that.
So he was doing this after.
Mm-hmm.
Like
100%.
when he got arrested in 2019, or was it like?
Oh man, I don't remember. There was two arrests, or there was three. There was two, right? There was two. So it was after the first one.
Okay.
But there was like a whole. But it wasn't he. He was indicted and everything, and he was like. What was the whole story with that? There was like, wasn't he?
He was indicted in Florida, and then the DA Alexander Acosta gave him like this really, really lenient jail sentence of like a year.
So he was convicted and he served, right?
Yeah, for like
exactly.
a year,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
And then that guy became Trump's labor secretary after giving those. So you can understand why people are suspicious of Trump and Epstein when I'm like, wait a minute, why would you put that guy as the labor secretary after he gave the most lenient slap on the wrist jail sentence for a guy running a global pedo ring?
Yeah, I know. It's really unfortunate that we have people like this, like Epstein, that are just so vile and inhumane and just represent the absolute worst of humanity, and yet because of their wealth and their power, it's like they really can cultivate friendships with like anybody they want to, and people will just be like, oh yeah, Epstein, cool, whatever. Like, I mean, that's just what power and wealth.
So like, what else? Who else got dropped in these files aside from Bannon?
Well, there was that Democrat that oh my God, this is so not my wheelhouse.
We can pivot soon. We just came up to that quick.
She was a black woman she was in Congress.
Oh, Plaskett Stacey something, yeah.
Yes. So she was implicated, I'm pretty sure. And that was like a big just kind of like told you so to the Democrats, who like only recently were like, yeah, Trump, why isn't he releasing the Epstein Files? And then it's like one of their own, like, well, you guys are involved just as much as we are.
When they were trying to throw Trump in prison, they could have just used Epstein and it would have gotten total broad unanimous support.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, why didn't you just use it then?
Totally. I've heard that argument
before. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Like,
yeah.
why didn't you just use it back in 2023? because you would have won that election and gotten everybody on board, and it just makes you realize that like our entire political landscape is a giant clown show where
and
nobody's
so
really
much we don't
interested
know.
in serving the people that they govern, and it's quite obvious no matter what side you're on. And so I've just kind of been realizing I've been a little bit less active this past year, so I'm sure you've noticed, and I'm sure everybody's noticed that I've barely been, involved, and it's just because the more plugged in I am with the political landscape, and the more I'm plugged in with these fucking influencers, who I've lost so much respect for, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why are I even getting worked up over this? Like, what's the point? Like, of getting,
especially
like, why
when you're
is
going to
this-
be a father and you can now have one beautiful family to focus in on. And
Yeah, it's not as pertinent to me unless I'm like, I hate to say this, but like, unless I'm getting a substantial paycheck, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And I never used to think this way. I used to say, hey, I'm fighting tyranny and you can't put a price on this, and I'm going to work double as hard and do as much as I can and put my safety and everything at risk to like fight this new world order that's happening. And then the people that you thought were on your team to fight this, because fighting the new world order is a team sport, all of a sudden are literally doing their bidding by embodying every stereotype that they are being accused of
by the lefts. By the left.
via embracing people like Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate.
Yeah, no, they've become
Insane.
extremely they've become extremely hostile, rage-filled. They've embraced like a victimhood complex. They've embraced the whole intersectional hierarchy of, the most victimized at the top, who are thus the most entitled, and then the oppressors, at the bottom, or vice versa, however it works, right?
Yeah.
And because the white Christian male has been kept down and silenced and censored and shamed by the left for the last decade, now all of a sudden, like, that gives white Christian males the right to like flip the hierarchy and do the same thing to all the minorities, like kick out all the, like, you know what I mean? It's just like it's totally nuts. It really is a gift to the left.
I don't even like to use the word left or right. I think it's just globalists and neocons. It's just globalists, neocons, and neoliberal entities.
Why do you say neocons? What does that have to do with it?
I think that you have multiple factions that are working in unison with each other to help create this one world government where a very small group of
but one
bankers,
world
bankers, tech leaders, academics, et cetera, government officials are centralizing power in an unfathomable way to exude as much control over the populace as possible, and different events and different political ideologies periodically take the forefront to achieve that goal. Like in the early 2000s, it was the neoconservative Project for a New American Century ideology. Well, let's go into Iraq, let's go into Afghanistan, let's implement the Patriot Act, let's
nation building, spreading democracy.
Let's blatantly ignore that a terrorist attack is going to occur close to 9/11 while record number of put options were placed on airlines. Like there's that, and then like all of a sudden COVID hits, and then like, oh, now we're going to embrace wokeness and BLM and classism and fighting infectious disease to shut the country down, and then there's a climate change agenda for 15-minute cities to keep you sequestered.
First of all, these things overlap with each other. They're not sequential one after the other. And also, like, I think you're conflating things. Like, globalism is so different from neoconservatism. They just are. Neoconservatism is not trying to create one world governance. It's not trying to create technocratic governance and destroy the might and the exceptionalism of America in the process.
Yes.
What it's trying to do is it's trying to, naively establish conditions and impose democracy on enemy countries or developing countries from the top down, so that all of these countries are then allies with America, and we have leverage over them, or they're useful to us, or we have shared whatever. That's totally different than like a WEF, like one world technocratic global citizen.
Yes, I understand that the two, in theory, can present totally different ideologies, but here's like the other thing that's kind of being missed out on, and it's that like.
And you're talking about these influencers like Nick Fuentes and stuff like that, and I don't see the connection with those people and the like either globalism or.
Oh, I could totally kind of draw. I could draw the dots a little bit, but with the neoconservatism stuff, right? Like, what's happened as a result of some of this neoconservatism? Mass migration into America from people who are escaping terrorism, but really it could be terrorists forming terror cells.
But why is that a result of neoconservatism? Just because of like any destruction we've caused in like Afghanistan?
Just in general, it's not even us. It's the fact that it's us. It's hostile radical forces that emerge as a result.
So again,
of
you
that,
said it's not even us. That's not the mass migration. Isn't a result of neoconservatism. If it is, it's only in specific countries. But there's mass migration from other countries that have nothing to do with those nation-building projects that we engaged in.
You are creating mass migration from war-torn countries as a result of wars that we have helped perpetuate and elongate, like Afghanistan and Iraq and all that other stuff.
But I just don't see this as like a uniquely kind of blame America problem.
I don't think it should. I'm not blaming America. I'm just giving an example of how neoconservatism could foster globalism. In that, if a terrorist attack occurs, if a terrorist attack starts occurring in America, or a series of attacks occur, what's going to wind up happening? There's going to be more calls for censorship. There's going to be more calls for digital ID. There's going to be more calls for monitoring the internet. And that type of technocratic control is an agent and an object of WEF globalism that gets talked about at Davos every single year. That's what I'm trying to kind of draw.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Sure. I just think those are very kind of superficial strings to tie, because there's also just as many differences that you can paint, right, between these two things, and I just think they exist in different
avenues.
Yeah, and I just don't see what's happening. Getting back to what's happening with these edgelords and these rage bait influencers that are really trying to they're trying to exploit like young men who are understandably angry for so many reasons in America, and they're trying to channel that into hatred against like Jews and women and non-Christians and Indians. I wouldn't paint those people as globalists or neocons. I absolutely not. I do believe that they're anti-American, and I do believe that they're anti-Western.
Well, guess what? Destroying America and Western values is an object of globalism, because Western values, Western civilizations, and the values that come with living in the United States were built to be deliberately antithetical to the object of globalism.
Sure, but there's a lot of other, there's a lot of other goals of other isms, right, like fascism, that are also anti-American and anti-Western, that are not the same.
Yes, but
globalism.
Yes, but fascism could be implemented in a globalist landscape, like global fascism, where governments and large megacorporations and academics and the news coordinate in lockstep with each other to create this unholy relationship between governments and megacorporations is fascism. And implementing fascism on a global scale, it seems like the absolute textbook objective of what these people want. Even in World War II, I know this is like totally a digression, but even in World War II, a lot of these globalists, a lot of the people that founded the modern version of the CIA were giving money to Adolf Hitler leading up to his rise to power, because they figured that a guy like Adolf Hitler, with his authoritarian and very like orderly sense of total centralized control over everything, would be the perfect figurehead to kind of lead whatever, New World Order they were trying to create. So that's a theory, right?
Okay. I feel like we're jumping to like hold other conversations here without like going back to maybe the original point we are making, which is that you have become jaded and bitter by in a post-2024 election world, what you have seen kind of emerge online from people that you believed were on our side. And I think I agree with that. And what you're very I think talking about it in these abstract terms of these people being globalists or neocons, this is just trying to like label them things instead of talking about like the actual specific the specific effect that they're having on conservatives like us and on the left, who's watching this all and being like, oh my gosh, this is such a gift to us. You know what I mean? Like, this is exactly what we always said all Republicans were. And now the people that we have done a really good job at actually keeping on the fringes, because you can't have a conservative movement without gatekeeping, because conservatism involves principles, and people who don't share those principles aren't conservatives.
It involves conserving. Right. Is
Exactly.
What it means.
So if you are not conservative, if you're not a conservative on economics, on foreign policy, on, constitutional issues, then like what the hell are you doing calling yourself a conservative? And what's wrong with us saying you are not a conservative, you're not welcome in our movement? That does not mean that we are canceling them or engaging in censorship. Cancel culture is when you want somebody to lose their livelihood or lose their job as a result of their like political or ideological beliefs. When we are criticizing Tucker Carlson for laundering Nick Fuentes' bad ideas into the mainstream, we're not saying that like Tucker Carlson should lose his platform or shouldn't be able to speak or should lose his job or his livelihood. Nobody is doing that. We're just exercising our free speech and our right to criticize just like he can do. And if he can call out people like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and Lindsey Graham and put thumbnails on his episode streams of Lindsey Graham with like vampire fangs, like sucking the blood out of whatever, all of like the good faith, like peace-loving isolationists, then like why can't we criticize like Tucker Carlson for being like a like sniveling weasel who has no consistent ideology at all and has completely 100% turned into a leftist on every single issue except for social issues that involve his faith, such as like abortion and LGBTQ rights. But on every single issue, he has become a leftist. And the proof is in the pudding. If you look at the amount of people just in 2025, the guests that he has had on in his show, the majority of them have been outspoken, proud leftists that Tucker Carlson will try to like paint as conservatives.
Well, he's also trying to keep his audience financially enslaved.
And he promotes
by telling
them.
people that Bitcoin is a scam. It was created by the CIA. He's like deliberately guiding people away from investing.
Oh,
in
that's interesting.
Yeah, he's like that's another facet of it, and is that he interviews people like Nick Fuentes, who not only do they characterize characterize like the freedom movement the way I characterize like libtards at city council meetings, right? But he's also like deliberately telling people, hey, don't buy Bitcoin. Don't invest in like the infinitely better money that has a fixed supply cap that is mathematically designed to increase in value while the fiat currency is depreciating. But he's embracing a guy like Fuentes who's openly promoted using a global fiat currency on a blockchain.
Oh, interesting.
He's also he's also interviewed financial criminals like Trevor Milton, who founded a company called Nikola, which is nothing more than a Ponzi scheme. It was basically a fake company that like ran its stock up for no reason. And he interviewed Sam Bankman-Fried to try to like almost get SBF a pardon while telling people that Bitcoin is a scam. Like the problems with Tucker is like Nick Fuentes is just scratching the surface.
I know.
It's not even like it's not even the fact that you're interviewing Nick Fuentes, you're criticizing Lindsey Graham. Like I don't like Lindsey Graham, and I don't want to be associated with having to like Lindsey Graham now because criticizing Nick Fuentes now
suddenly
has to go
means
in
you're
line
a
with like
neocon.
well,
but this is
I don't want to do that.
But this is also a way in which Tucker Carlson and all of these people are leftists. Is that if you disagree with them, or if you're like, actually, I'm not an isolationist, that means you're a neocon. That means you're a warmonger. That means you're a war hawk. Like, it's the same thing that the left did. Like, racist, you know what I mean? Misogynist, fascist, like, white supremacist. Like, we're all neocons.
So
if we disagree that isolationism is a utopian dream that has been tried just like communism and actually doesn't work, that means that suddenly we support like Bush era like nation building? No.
But you don't think it's odd that these types of characters and these types of ideals just pop up and become super mainstream right as Trump is about to win, and right as like this insane culture that we were trying to fight against is all of a sudden like starting to die off? You don't think it's like a little bit odd and almost like pre-planned that like
no, because
now
this
is happening like that?
Because I'm researching this for my book and I see the steps that it took to get to where we are. It didn't come out of nowhere, right? Like a lot of conservatives now, this has all been kind of burst into the mainstream with the Fuentes Carlson interview, and a lot of conservatives are just like, oh my God, what's going on? Is this actually a problem? But some of us have been paying attention for a long time, and some of us have looked into this, and there are markers. There are like moments in the last decade, since like 2015, that have kind of shaped where the culture has gone and ushered in the conditions for us to arrive at the current moment. And it's not one thing. It's, you know, it's not just the pandemic, or it's not just the, you know, the emergence of the alt-right, and it's not just October 7th, and it's not just the war in the Ukraine, but it's a lot of stuff together.
You have an entire group of very disaffected young men who don't think that they'll ever own a business, don't think that they're ever going to be able to own a house, don't think that they can ever save any money, feel completely nihilistic, probably lost a bunch of their savings buying fucking meme coins and scams that were promoted to them by their favorite crypto influencers, who, guess what? They're still listening to them, and they're almost even stronger indebted to those people. And then now these people have been so broken by COVID. Many of them probably wind up getting vaccinated because they got bullied into it, and they feel really bad about themselves.
Yeah,
now
and
they want to lash out about the Jews.
Being men, and they're looking for somebody to blame. This always happens when you have a demoralized population, an economically turbulent population, right? When you have low morale, you always look for somebody to blame. It's called scapegoating. We all learned about it in first grade. And there has been no better scapegoat than the Jews, or as what is more palatable and socially acceptable today, the Zionists, throughout history, because that playbook is already written. You don't have to invent anything new. All the conspiracy theories are the same. They're just resurrected and tweaked. You just replace like little, you know, different language to update it to the cultural zeitgeist of whatever decade you're in. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot. The anti-Semitism is absolutely insane, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this episode is because we wanted to debunk some of the like right-wing anti-Semitic tropes that we've been hearing, which I'm 100% happy to do, and we can get into that. I also
we should do that. Anyway,
okay, let's do it. Let's do it. No, I was gonna bring up Owen's episode with you.
Oh yeah, It's funny though, because I told Owen, I was like within 10 minutes of the episode, I'm like, you know, man, if people were just buying Bitcoin and just stacking sats and like saving in a better currency, a lot of these cultural problems wouldn't really be here right now. And he kind of giggled at me, saying, "Oh, it could all be censored. It could all be tracked. It's not a real solution."
Well, I can't speak to that. That is so not my wheelhouse, like at all. So that will be you educating me. I won't have much to contribute to that.
Synopsis, Karys, is that broken money creates broken societies, and when you can save in a currency that cannot be inflated away or printed up or confiscated by governments, then you generally have more of an incentive to be a better human being and to work harder and to build businesses and to get married and to have a close-knit community.
But why not just go back to like fiat, like currency and like gold and stuff?
Why not go back to gold? Well, first of all, you have to be able to audit the gold.
Sorry, not go back to fiat.
The gold. Well, okay. So here's one reason, right? One is that like we're getting digitized, right? Things are going digital, and you can't like stop technology. You can't stop progress, because if you do, then only bad people create the better technology. And if you want good freedom-loving people to be involved with this and to create better freedom technology to counteract this, and also you can't really like we had a gold standard up until the 1960s, and then Nixon just said, "Yep, we're done. We can't pay our debt. We're no longer going to have a gold standard." So what's going to stop governments from saying we don't want to do it?
You just don't think it's realistic.
Yeah, it just won't be.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just not a realistic way to go about things. And also, the more technologically advanced we get, the less scarce gold is going to be, because it's going to be a lot easier to mine and produce more gold. And so the value of gold is going to wind up deteriorating substantially as we technologically advance. And one last thing, like, you know, imagine you're like living in a war-torn country, right? And you have to leave, right? Imagine like anti-Semitism gets really bad in America. We can't be here as Jews. Where you're gonna just take a freaking suitcase full of gold to the airport? Right. No, but you could take your wallet with you and remember your 24-word seed phrase and be able to spend money and have financial sovereignty anywhere you go. Right. So it's just a better technology, and it's a better use of money.
Hear.
That's my view. And you don't need central banks anymore, and a lot of people hate Jews and are super anti-Semitic because they associate us with being in charge of the
interest rates,
global central
and
bank financial fiat system. And when I'm telling you guys, just buy Bitcoin and like opt out of this. You know, these same people are going to say, "Oh, Bitcoin was made by the Jews. Buy my Stu Peters coin." Like, it's just like the brain rot is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I heard you doing a really good job kind of going back and forth with Owen on this stuff, but then he was just saying stuff, that is in my wheelhouse. You guys got on, like, the subject of Israel and Jews, and he just said just blatantly false things, and because you didn't know if they were true or not, you didn't know what to say. And I was just like, I can't believe people actually are going to believe some of this stuff. Like, it was just nuts. And right before I came here to Austin, for some reason, I told you this the other day, and you were like, we can talk about this on the podcast.
And we are talking about it on the podcast.
What happened? I posted something. I posted about Tucker Carlson's latest guest,
okay,
who is George Galloway.
Yeah.
George Galloway is somebody, like, anybody who knows anything about UK politics or Islamism in the West, or the Red-Green Alliance between, like, socialists and Islamists will know who George Galloway is. He's somebody who's been on my radar, given what I do for well over a decade. George Galloway founded the Workers' Party of Britain. Okay. He is an outspoken, self-declared, proud socialist. Okay, in every way.
Well, John Mearsheimer is also a full-blown communist too, right?
He is left. He is like left of Jeremy Corbyn. Okay, Tucker Carlson has him on his show, and he says in the little caption above, on many issues, quote, he's one of the most conservative politicians in the UK. This is the propaganda that Tucker Carlson has been spewing now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Maduro's really a conservative because there's no trans people in Venezuela, right? Like, this is what he's doing. Like, oh, Ben Cohen, yeah, he runs like a leftist ice cream company, but he's actually really conservative when it comes to, like, Russia, Ukraine. Like, this is what Tucker's doing. He takes out individual issues and he disregards the fact that these people have a worldview that is socialist or communist in nature. Anyway, so I just called him out, and I was like, this guy's not a conservative. He's a proud socialist. He literally runs the workers. He founded the Workers' Party in Britain. And and then Owen Schroyer, who I've never interacted with, never met in person, never had a conversation with, either online or anywhere else, like, retweeted that and was like, this is a never Trumper. I have all the receipts. This woman is a never Trumper. I have all the receipts. These people.
You should just try to go on a show and talk about it.
And
you should hit him up and be like, dude, let me go on your show and talk. And
I'm not going to hit him up, but if he wants me on his show, I'll go on. But, like, here's the thing. Never Trumper? Like, did you vote for Trump in 2016?
No.
Neither did I. Does that make us never Trumpers?
No, I don't think so.
Of course not. Like, half of Trump's administration didn't vote for Trump in 2016.
Well, his own vice president called him a fascist and said he was like Hitler.
Vance didn't. Yeah. Exactly. So by Owen Schroyer's logic, anybody who didn't vote for Trump in 2016, which, by the way, I didn't vote at all.
I voted for the Green Party.
Because I wasn't even in America. Yeah, you were. Yeah, I was going to grad school.
Double agent.
Yeah, I'll pull out my Mossad T-shirt. Yeah. Everybody will know. But the point is that by Owen's logic, like, anybody who didn't vote for Trump in 2016 but is a conservative is a never Trumper, when in actuality that word has meaning. The never Trumpers were an informal cast of characters. They were usually public figures, a lot of academics, a lot of politicians, and they were conservatives who kind of publicly vowed to never support Trump for president as the nominee. And then a lot of these people ended up not being never Trumpers. But I was never part of that group because I never declared myself a never Trumper. I was always open-minded to Trump changing my mind. And within a year of his presidency, I started to be like, oh, I actually really like how this guy governs. You know what I mean? So the fact that makes me a never Trumper.
Were you always conservative?
I think I started the process of realizing I was a conservative in high school. But I went to a very, like, woke liberal high school, and everybody was a Democrat, and I was voted to be on, like, the Republican, like mock Senate committee, and I was like, that's weird. I'm not even a conservative. But people, I guess, saw me that way, and so that was, like, the first moment where I kind of started to evaluate what type of politics I did have, and
DC, right?
it was a long road to get to where I am today. But no, I grew up in the Bay Area, in California. in San Francisco. And then I spent 18 years in New York City. And then I moved to D.C. a few years ago.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, I grew up in the two like most liberal, progressive places in the country. Or
Yeah,
I lived in the two most progressive
I grew up in New York
places.
City also, and it was it's just totally different world.
Yeah,
totally different place.
So I just thought that was fun. I just thought that was really funny. Like if you're gonna come at, and also it didn't have anything to do with my post. Like what does that have to do with me saying that that the guy that Tucker Carlson is having on is not conservative, but Tucker Carlson is trying to cosplay him as conservative? What does that, even if I was another Trumper, like what does that have to do with anything? Like does that make what I said invalid?
I mean,
it was like so bizarre.
No, well, look, I think that generally speaking, social media has just devolved into kind of a cesspool where everybody is just trying to get attention. People care more about getting attention from their posts than they do about getting the truth or fighting tyranny or doing anything to fight the new world order, so to speak. I think it's devolved into like the right wing version of like Bravo.
But that track,
it's like the right wing version of like Vanderpump Rules or TMZ or like 9 Day Fiance.
Right.
Like this is
Totally.
what it's, and so people are just like blinded by just attention. People post things without fully fact checking, without fully realizing. Like, I don't think Owen Schroyer like did anything to malicious, like out of pure malice towards you. He probably thought something and posted it in 2 seconds. It's
just really bizarre. I have the receipts as if I'm hiding something. I've never been shy about the fact that I didn't vote for Trump in 2016.
What Owen has gone through these past 4 years, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies.
I know he's had a hard time.
He's had a hard time. Like with ever since January 6th, and ever since he's gotten into, this is a guy who went to jail, right? Because he believed in Donald Trump and Donald Trump's message to such an extent.
Okay, but we don't have to go into the personal. I know you're friends with him, and that's totally cool. But we can also have a respectful conversation about things that he said and whether there's validity to it.
A lot of things he says are just total bullshit.
We don't need to do the Tucker Carlson this guy is evil and will drink your blood type thing.
No,
I'm not saying anything
what I'm
like
saying
that
though
about
is that
Owen
what I'm
Schroyer.
saying though is that there's a lot of stuff that he's just blatantly incorrect about, financially,
so
all this stuff, right?
I couldn't believe some of the things he said. 500,000 Jews have left Israel since October 7th. Oh my God. There's 30,000 Jews who have left. There's actually 80,000 that left in 2024, but there was 50,000 who immigrated. So it was
yeah, well, I think you're going to get a more the
it was
net
insane.
migration to Israel is going to be a lot higher than the migration from Israel.
Netanyahu closed all the bridges and the airports. What bridges? There's no bridges in Israel that lead to other places. There's places. There's bridges in Jerusalem that lead from one part of Jerusalem to another part of Jerusalem. And there's a bridge to the Jordan Valley, but nobody's gonna cross into that area. It's just bizarre. And what does he mean? Airports plural. There's only one international airport in Israel.
I'll tell you this though.
It's completely false.
I'll tell you this about
Netanyahu never closed
the
airports or the bridges, except during for a couple days because of the Iranian missiles in April. It was never to prevent people from leaving. And one more thing about that, and then we can get off this. When Owen said, yeah, the Jews are fleeing, and I mean, there's bombs dropping. Who would want to be there during a war? Actually, people were scraping to get into Israel. There are incredible stories of Jews who, when the war broke out, they went back to Israel and they couldn't get in because there was a war, and they literally hung out on lifeboats. And then for 2 days trying to get in, they couldn't, they tried all these different ways, and they tried to walk across through through Jordan, and there's just there's an unbelievable there's unbelievable stories of Jews wanting to return to their homeland, because even in the middle of the war, Jews felt more safe in Israel than they did in the diaspora. I certainly did. I went to Israel during the war. My dad was there when October 7th happened. He didn't he wasn't oh my God, let's get you know what I mean? Let's get out of here. I mean, it's factually the opposite of the way. And when you were where did you get that information that Netanyahu closed the bridges?
The Times of Israel. I want to go.
He said the Israeli Times. There's no Israeli
Times. The Times of Israel and all that stuff. Okay, here's what I want to say though, and it's that you could probably go on Owen's show and tell him this directly on his show, and he will actually listen to you tell him that. Whereas somebody like Tucker, no, he did. He had Ezra Levant on, and Ezra Levant had a whole conversation with him, just totally picking Owen's viewpoint about Israel and about the Middle East.
He doesn't even have a viewpoint about Israel.
Okay, but he had Ezra Levant on, and Ezra Levant just picked his views apart, and it was in a very nice way. It was very informative. It was a very respectful dialogue. It was actually one of the best episodes that I've ever seen. I recommend watching it at some point. But what I'm trying to say,
watched clips of it.
okay,
I remember when Ezra did it.
What I'm trying to say though is that Tucker, the difference between Owen Shroyer and Tucker Carlson is that Tucker would never have somebody like that on anymore because he's trying to promote an agenda.
Right.
And he's become a slave to it, to a certain type of an audience that's not even real because it's artificially propagated by bots and foreign agents, and he doesn't care, right? Owen at least will have people on with dissenting viewpoints and let them talk.
Is he gonna interrupt me every 5 seconds? Look, if he wants me to come on and talk about aid to Israel, I'm happy to.
Yes, I'm just saying that there's a big difference between him and people like Tucker and Nick Fuentes. And the thing that frustrates me, and I'm saying this because I'll say this to him directly, the thing that frustrates me about Owen and people like Owen is that they'll glaze over guys like Tucker and Nick Fuentes without understanding that people like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, with the way they deliver their message, are actually undermining the real journalism and the actual thoughtfulness that Owen Shroyer at least tries to present when talking to people about things, right? I don't think that Owen Shroyer, I know for a fact that this guy doesn't hate Jews or has a hateful bone in his body. I know that he's not that type of a human being.
You don't have to hate Jews to be complicit in literally propagating the most tried and tired anti-Semitic lies that have existed since the dawn of time.
Right. What I'm saying though,
he launders those ideas, and he thinks they're newly discovered. They're literally ancient.
Yes, the problem is glazing over guys like Tucker and Nick Fuentes, and it undermines the fact that Owen will at least have people with differing views on and let them share them share those views uninterrupted, so his audience gets a more broad-based view of what's going on. Whereas people like Tucker and Nick Fuentes deliberately just talk into an echo chamber. That's where the huge difference is. And what upsets me is that by glazing over those people, you're going to wind up getting lumped in with them, and I don't think he deserves to do that, especially with everything he's suffered through these past 4 years. I don't think it's fair to him. That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
But let's talk about the newspaper. Let's talk about
what newspaper?
Well, all the we were talking about how Haaretz and the Times of Israel and all these other newspapers are not indicative of what's going on. But when we were talking, he's like, "Oh, I got my information from the Times of Israel and these newspapers." And if you're somebody that's not plugged in to what's going on, or you don't have family in the region, or you didn't live in that region, and you see the Times of Israel or Haaretz, which are Israeli publications, and you see this being written in those publications, it's not unreasonable to formulate certain viewpoints because you just think that that's what's being talked about in Israel.
I think there's a huge difference between the Times of Israel and Haaretz.
Okay.
The Times of Israel is a center-left paper in Israel.
Okay.
It's not extreme. It's not a very leftist, oriented paper.
I don't even know about this stuff. I want to learn. I'm trying to learn and be a student about this.
And it is sometimes it has really, really great journalistic reports. But because it's center left, sometimes it can be a little biased against, for example, the Likud government, Bibi's government, because they're conservative, right? It's how it works with any publication. If you have a left bias or a right bias, you're going to be harder on the other side, right? That being said, Times of Israel, I wouldn't say it's an unreliable source for journalism, for information about Israel. Haaretz is commie trash, okay? Reading Haaretz is picking up a World Workers Unite socialist zine in America. I'm serious.
It's called a zine?
Really?
I don't know.
My brother always said zine. I always said zine because my brother had zines, and he'd be like, "Oh, I got my weekly zine." Okay, interesting. So, thank you.
I just made that up, so I don't know.
Wait, it is zine?
Yeah,
Hey! Oh my God, such a prankster you are. So, no, any conservative, if you're a leftist, I forgive you for reading Haaretz, but any conservative who relies on Haaretz for their information about Israel is such a useful idiot for the commies. They are literally reading the most leftist trash that's not even journalism. They're an activist. They're an activist outlet.
What's their goal?
The CEO, the goal is to undermine the Israeli government and destroy the country, just like any socialist newspaper or
But it's in Israel, and if they destroy
here.
Israel, then they're going to get totally. Then it's going to be Islamist
but they
rule.
have the same goals as the socialists here. They want to tear it all down.
Okay.
They want to tear it all down and rebuild it with a centralized, socialized system of governance. Right? They are the same, and not only that, Haaretz here's the kicker. Haaretz makes zero. They have a Hebrew edition and an English edition.
Okay.
First of all, the translations are totally different. So there's been incredible reports showing how like Haaretz will report on the same story in Hebrew and English. There's countless examples of this happening, and they'll literally have opposing contradictory evidence or information because they're literally have different audiences and they're trying to create certain propagandic messaging to a vulnerably ignorant international community that doesn't know anything. So things that they can't get away with saying in their Hebrew edition to Israelis, lies, they will say to an international audience because that's the only people who read. That's the only people who reads the English edition. So they just lie and lie and lie.
Okay, but then wouldn't somebody in Israel just translate and say, "What the fuck are y'all doing?"
They do all the time. That's what I'm saying. Like everybody knows this in Israel, and you can go and you can read incredible exposés that is real Israeli journalists or Israeli researchers or Israeli politicians have have written or have spoken about like this type of journalistic malfeasance. But the last thing I want to say is that the Hebrew edition, Haaretz, is so hated in Israel among the left and the right, except for like the very fringe, like communist, like population in
and
Israel.
And they're not having protests against their own government, which is why,
that they can't even make a buck. So the Hebrew edition is virtually out of print, and they literally have to rely on gullible international readers like Evan frickin' Schroyer to read their English. What did I say?
Evan. You called him Evan.
Potato. To read their freaking English edition and then regurgitate their propaganda points about like evil Israel with like greater ambitions.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Are the journalists or the CEOs or the heads of that newspaper prosecuted at all in Israel?
No, they wouldn't be. They have a right to lie. They have a right to free speech, just like we do.
Because in Gaza,
they don't have a constitution, but they have basic laws.
In Gaza or in Palestine or in their neighboring countries, they wouldn't be afforded
there's no freedom
those.
of press.
Yeah, they would not be afforded those same rights to criticize their own government. And it almost seems like when you read the Times of Israel and when you read Haaretz, you're seeing more criticism than praise for the Israeli government.
Of course, because
by leaps,
Israel's actually a democracy, and you can say whatever you want.
Whereas in these other countries, that is non-existent.
There is not one country in the Middle East that has freedom of the press. Not
And so
one.
when they say, "Oh, Israel's a fascist state" and all this other bullshit, just literally look at the newspapers, and the newspapers are more critical of their government than almost anybody else.
Yeah.
And so like you could easily dismantle that narrative.
Yeah, I know. Like people will be like, "Oh, look, there's protests in Israel against Netanyahu. This proves that everybody hates Netanyahu and they want him out." And it's like, no, it doesn't. It proves that just like in America, there are liberals in Israel and conservatives, and the liberals don't like the conservative government, which Netanyahu represents, and because it's a democracy and they have freedom of movement and the right to protest, they will go out on the street.
There were an absurd amount of protests that were taking place before October 7th, though.
Yeah, over the judicial reform.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, that's a certain issue, and a lot of those were funded by people like Ehud Barak, Epstein's fanboy.
I didn't know
by
that.
the way,
that's interesting.
Basically, like by people don't realize, conservatives in America don't realize a few things about their like anti-Zionist position. They don't realize where anti-Zionism comes from, which is the Soviet Union in the 1950s, first of all.
Wait.
So they don't realize that they are literally regurgitating communist talking points.
Can you backtrack and explain this? Because I thought anti-Zionism existed throughout the entire time that the Zionist project was occurring, and you had debates between different sects of Jews about whether or not they wanted to undertake this project, and you had debates within the Muslim community and within the international community about whether this is a good idea, and so that could have also been considered anti-Zionism too.
No, I don't think so. You had Jews that, well, first of all, you have different forms of Zionism.
Yes.
You have political Zionism,
Labor
religious
Zionism,
cultural Zionism, and these Zionists had different ideas. Some of them, but they all were Zionists. What does that mean? They all believed that Jews in Israel. It's just that they disagreed about, for example, like the time period, right? Like whether the time is now, or how that should be implemented. Should it be implemented through like settlement, through like toying the land through the ground up, right? Like how involved should other countries be?
What actually happened? How did this all start?
How did what all start?
Well, the Zionist project, like, how did it come about?
Well, it started in ancient Egypt, when the Jews were kicked out, and the tribes of Israel, and then the religion and people of Judea and of Judaism started praying to Jerusalem, and wanting to return to their land. I mean, but this is right. But this is what I knew you were. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, anybody who says anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, or I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not anti-Zionist, they either don't know what they're talking about, they're so ignorant, or they're willfully malicious.
Yes, but 90% of the people who say this, though, from me having conversations with people, are not. They don't know. Yeah, they're not anti-Semites, because I'll talk to them and I'll say, hey man, like, you don't think that like Israel should function as a self-sovereign country, even if it's like 67 borders, and if the Palestinians had their own state and this and that, and they say, well, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, well, I guess you're not an anti-Zionist. Cool, you just didn't know what you were saying.
Okay, so that's a good point. Yeah. But what I was going to say was that when people say anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism, they're ignoring two things. Number one, the religion of Judaism, which is also, like, Judaism isn't just a religion, right? We're also a people. We're a tribe,
yeah,
right?
People of Judea. That's why it's called Judea. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
Jew for Judea.
Yes.
So if anybody was wondering, if anybody wanted to pull the, like, oh, Jews aren't indigenous to Israel, like, really? Then why is it called Judea? Jew. Where do you think the word Jew comes from? Because we are tied to the land. Our intrinsic religious and ethnic identity is tied to that land. There is no separating Zionism from Judaism. There's no it is in our prayers, our daily prayers, praying to Jerusalem next year.
It's in the Old Testament. It's in the Torah. It's right there.
Many of our holidays, it's returning to the land is makes up. It's what constitutes our religion. Okay,
it's also in the prophets. It's in Lamentations.
The other reason why that idea that anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism is completely bogus is because they do like polls of Jews around the world, right? Like Britain will everywhere there's Jews, they poll them, and then you go and you average out the polls, and globally every year it says the same thing. Anywhere on average from 85 to 95% of global Jewry identify as Zionists, okay? Which means that they believe in the right of Jewish self-determination in their ancestral homeland of Israel. If 95% of Jews consider themselves Zionists and have this belief, and you say, well, I'm just anti-Zionist, I'm not anti-Semitic, you're basically against 95% of Jews. The only Jews you're not against are like the fringe, like tree-hugging, like commies that like hang out with like Jewish Voice for Peace and all of these, like universe.
Yeah, they put like the filling on wrong. Like they don't know what
exactly.
to do. Yeah.
So like it's a smokescreen. It's bullshit. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, full stop. And the reason why you don't think so is because the Soviet Union created this entire campaign in the 50s because of the Cold War to essentially delegitimize the state of Israel, because the Middle East was a very important front in the Cold War, and Israel had sided with the U.S., which was it was a huge blow to the Soviet Union, because they thought Israel was going to side with them when they were created in 1948, and they didn't. And so the Soviet Union did what they do best, which is in addition to like arming all of Israel's enemies, like the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Egypt, right, and Assad in Syria. In addition to arming all of the Arabs, they also began a massive disinformation and propaganda campaign to delegitimize Israel. And what they did is they literally appropriated Nazi materials, their curriculum, their posters, their pamphlets, and they just used the same exact tropes, the same lies about Jews, controlling this and manipulating this and stealing this, and they just replaced the word Jew with Zionist, and they said all the same stuff. And that, just like all of the other Soviet adventures in socialism, have infiltrated our institutions, right? And now we have all of our academic and even like the State Department was heavily infiltrated by the Soviet Union, and we have a lot of our institutions today, and the media
paperclip and stuff too.
That's true.
And academics as a result of that. And
but my point is that the Soviet Union infiltrated so many of our institutions, and we all know that. That's one of the reasons we have such woke culture today, and yet we will not even entertain the fact that the same thing happened when it came to Israel. The same thing happened.
Okay. How do you feel about the Irgun and the Haganah and like that whole myth about these people were considered terrorists before they became the IDF?
No, that's not true at all. So there was 3. I mean, oh my God, do we really want to get into this one?
Yeah,
I feel like this,
I was actually researching. I was researching
we
this
can
shit
get
like
into
crazy. It's so interesting.
Okay, yeah, but I don't think this is good to get into. Okay, first of all, I don't think it's good to get into because we literally have to explain the history of each of those different militias. It would take so much time.
You just do it like
and
the
I'm not
elevator pitch.
So there was multiple militias that
Yes.
ended up kind of absorbing themselves and
Can I
came
try?
into the yeah, go for it.
Okay, sorry, because I can maybe do it in 2 sentences.
Okay, go.
Okay, so the Haganah were basically a defensive military front to help work alongside the British to protect Jewish settlements from Arab uprisings and whatnot. And
They didn't work alongside the British.
They did.
That
was the AI version. Was initially the goal was.
It's just that they weren't hostile to the British.
Yeah,
it's just that they weren't hostile. Unlike
okay.
other unlike other groups.
They were not hostile. They were strictly defensive.
Yeah.
And they were never the Haganah were never categorized as a terrorist organization
Never.
by any group at all. Even the Palestinian groups in the 1940s never categorized them as terrorists. The Irgun came about in the 1930s, and they started engaging in what you would consider in a lot more violent acts, like the King David Hotel,
against the British.
In order to protest the British, because the British broke their promise to them that was in the Balfour Declaration by limiting
and
migration
in
to
the
Palestine.
San Remo conference.
As a result of growing anti-Semitism and people like Adolf Hitler coming to power and Adolf Hitler's expansionist philosophy, and so they decided that they were going to do whatever is necessary, because you also had Arab uprisings and Arab acts of violence that were happening at the same time while they were
massacring Jews,
they were rejecting things like
and
the Peel
Arabs.
Commission and rejecting any partitions. And they're like, well, if the Arabs can do this, then we're going to do it too, and we don't care, and the British aren't helping us; they're actually hurting us. So we're going to do whatever means necessary. And actually, after the King David attack, they the British wound up kind of leaving shortly afterwards, and it wound up being partitioned. And then there was the Lehigh, which is the Stern Gang, and they were an even more violent, even more revolutionary version of. But
I don't think that the Lehigh got absorbed into the IDF though. I don't think they did.
No, they all did. They all did after the Arab-Israeli War. After the Arabs all revolted when Israel was granted statehood, they all had to work together. Because at first, like, the Haganah didn't really like the Lehigh and the Irgun, and they're like, well, shit, we got to work together, because if we don't work together, we're not going to have a country. And so they all just worked together and formed this unit.
Yes,
and
but there was a lot of people that left those units.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just giving the elevator pitch of what I've read.
Yeah, no. I think that's great, but...
But what I was saying, like, last sentence, is that a lot of them kind of got absorbed in this for the sake of having to preserve a country. When 9 Arab neighbors were attacking Israel as a result of this, they were telling people to leave their homes from Palestine because they were going to get it back later. And then they called this the Nakba, which was really they were leaving voluntarily because they thought they were going to conquer this land by force. And it was the Arab League that lied to these people. And then when this Arab-Israeli war happened, which took months for things to get resolved, they had to kind of coalesce with each other. And as a result of them coalescing, they formed this unit. And then a lot of what was considered terrorism by the international community, like the King David Hotel bombing, which to an outside observer, if you weren't Jewish or if you weren't from Israel, you'd say, yeah, that looks like fucking terrorism. It just kind of got swept away, and then people like Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir and whatnot, they wind up getting very important positions in the government, like such as being the prime minister. And then this is kind of how the modern IDF could have gotten created. Elevator pitch. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, but I think it's funny that, like, these instances of terrorism, like the King David, like, that's the only thing that people ever point to, because, like, any terrorism that took place amongst, like, you know, extremist, like, you know, pre-IDF militias was, like, it was few and far between. And so you can only point to very, you know, there's only a few examples of it. Same with settler violence. I mean, anyway. whatever.
But it's important to talk about because that's what people think, right? So you gotta
okay, so yes, but I think that there's probably a lot in there that you said that like you were even just like assuming that people know that they don't. So that's what I meant when I felt like people like in terms of what would be. I mean, I don't know. Do you think that your audience has like a baseline understanding of that kind of stuff?
I'm developing a baseline understanding. I literally learned this like an hour and a half ago, and I was excited
that's pretty
to share
good.
it. Yeah,
that's pretty good. But
shout out Lumo AI. Let's go.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, what are some of the other things that you've been hearing online that we have kind of talked about that come to mind right now that you feel like need to be debunked?
Oh, like Israel stole the land from the Palestinians.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, you basically summarized it very nicely. I think that the reason why that lie is so pervasive is because people imagine that people think of the Israelis as some sort of like imperialistic, like crusading force that came from Eastern Europe and just like dumped themselves into a land that was already occupied, which is complete boo hockey. I mean, we have a steady presence of Jews in that land for 3,000 years. All of the archaeological and even just like, tracks from like the Ottomans and any historical evidence from the Assyrians and from the Babylonians and the temple and everything and biblical history and everything, it all proves it. At various times, because a lot of Jews were in exile, sometimes that population in the area was very small, and other times it was very large, right? Like during the times of like King David and King Solomon and other times throughout history, right? But there. By the time Israel had reestablished itself as a sovereign nation in 1948, there had been steady flows of immigration, not just from Eastern Europe, but also throughout the Middle East of Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews of Middle Eastern and North African descent.
You want to know something funny?
Sure.
Is that, maybe I'm wrong, but from what I gathered, the strongest support for it on Netanyahu and the Likud government is not even from Ashkenazi white Jews. It's from it's from the Mizrahi Middle Eastern Jews are from Arab countries that were actually also had their own Nakba when every single Arab country was kicking their own Jews out like in the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah, Ashkenazis are left in Israel.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. And the brown Jews, right,
most right-wing ever.
Which make up more than half of the population, are conservative.
Yeah,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
The Arabs in Israel. If I'm wrong, you can please correct me, but the majority of like doctors are Arab Israelis because the Arabs don't have to serve in the IDF.
Not the majority, but the amount of doctors that are Arabs, like even I think doctors and lawyers maybe are disproportionate to the amount of Arabs in the population, which make up 20%.
It's like the opposite of us because we're all the doctors. We make up all the large proportion of doctors and lawyers here, but over there, it's,
Yeah. Same with like Christians. Like Christians outperform Jews in Israel in so many metrics. So Christians in certain ways are doing a lot better than Jews and Arabs. I mean, look, there's still like social discrimination, right? They're minorities. And in any country, you're going to be discriminating against any of your minorities. Yeah. But in terms of state-sanctioned discrimination or like, anti-Arab laws or anti-Christian laws, it does not exist.
It doesn't exist. And when they say like Israel's targeting churches and this and that, and I'm like,
oh my God.
Well, maybe Hamas is hiding something under a church, or maybe they're telling people to leave and they.
Well, first of all, there's only one church in Gaza. Well, there was two kind of,
okay.
but no, I mean they literally used the courtyard of the church as a staging ground to launch rockets.
Oh no shit. Okay.
I mean the whole church thing is that's it's such a lie. It's such an easily debunked lie.
What kind of sucks about this is that the criticism, people think like, oh, you can't criticize Israel without getting deplatformed or canceled and this and that.
That's all people do.
It's all bullshit, right? Because the more you criticize Israel, the more you get a platform. The reason I've been hesitant of because there's a lot to criticize about Israel, right? There's a ton, right? And you've lived in Israel, we're both Jews. Like we could like.
Well, Zionists are some of the biggest critics of Israel that I know.
Yeah, exactly. I went to Shabbat services in Bernie, and we were talking about
What's
October
Bernie?
7th in Bernie, Texas.
Oh.
And the rabbi's sons we were talking about October 7th, and certain false flag implications. And we were like, and like the rabbi's sons were telling me like, yeah, man, Netanyahu's generals, like it's possible that his generals kind of almost allowed it to happen because they were mad at him for consolidating power and this and that. And whether it's true or not,
No, that's such
fact,
bullshit.
the fact that you had the children of a rabbi who were as Zionist as you can get, you know, the fact that those people were like saying that and you're openly able to talk about that means that you can criticize.
Totally.
You can criticize as much as you want.
Totally.
The reason I've been uncomfortable criticizing is not because of backlash. It's because of it's because you get a flood of Nazi comments in whenever you post on X, and I'm just like, I don't want to engage with this. I don't want to do this.
I know.
And it's not like the backlash from Jews or Zionists or Israel or anything like that. It's the onslaught of Nazi commentators.
I know people literally that have
what
left
it is.
X just in the last like 6 months because they like Jews because they cannot literally say
feels like a struggle
they
session.
cannot say Shabbat Shalom without getting, you know, just bombed
Crisis King.
with like just like horrible like Jew, you know, like it's just like, I mean, look, I'm a nobody online, and like even me, I get like maybe like 1 or 2 direct messages a week, which is nothing. But these messages are always like, you know, like, go back to Israel, you dysgenic rat, or like, your body, my choice, sweetheart, or you know what I mean? Like really, like.
You think these are actual humans that are commenting or just bots?
I don't know.
What I've noticed too about social media is that when you go on these things, right? Like, it's basically my friend summed it up really perfectly. And it's a guy in India and a guy in Pakistan arguing about whether or not Donald Trump is making America great again. And that's what it's turned
Well,
into.
they did say that the guy that works for X did say that when they were looking at fake accounts and bots in America, the most common, or that were posing as Americans, like the most common bio had like an American flag and a cross.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that. Before we wrap up, we gotta do what we gotta finish with the Palestine thing, right?
There's so much like.
Well,
it's
basically, like the elevator pitch is that, you know, the JNF spent a lot of money, grossly overpaid for land.
No. The elevator pitch is that Jews came since the 1800s. Jews were coming from Europe and the Middle East, and they were toiling and working the land, and there was no country there. It was literally it was part of the Ottoman Empire, and then it was part of the British, and there was at various times there was more Jews than Arabs, or more Arabs than Jews.
But the British also fucked up royally because the British promised a Jewish state while also promising full Arab independence if they fought alongside them. And then in the 1930s, because the British needed the Middle East as a form of control, they had to kind of be slightly appeasing to Hitler,
right?
Because Hitler was courting the Arabs
to
join them against the British.
They appointed Hashemi al-Husseini, which was like a Hitler.
Hitler apologist, and a lot of this stuff is just
and he's
an
early
offshoot.
Palestinian
A lot of this Palestinian stuff is an offshoot of Nazism now. Anyway,
totally.
But what I was saying is that like this is what I get. I could be wrong on this, but what I was saying is that. The land was purchased by we purchased the land legally by landlords in that region.
Yes, but it wasn't like the JNF came and were like, we're gonna take this land. No, like Jews came throughout the 1800s and they purchased land from absentee landowners, like Syrians, like South Syrians, like people who weren't there and that were happy to make money. And then as the Jews were building up the land from the ground up, working and toiling, and these were poor Jews. A lot of these were poor Russian immigrants or poor Jews from Yemen. You know, like as they were building up the state because they were proud Zionists and they realized that like this is, you know, they could only be safe if they could have sovereignty. As they were building up the land, it attracted a lot of Arab migration, and Jews and Arabs worked together. And there was, you know, some very extremist factions of Arabs that tried to purge the area of Jews and.
But weren't there
Arabs
also Jewish landowners? Weren't there Arabs who had who were farming on that land for generations and generations, and they were like, and then because certain Jewish families or Jewish people own that land, they decided to replace the people who were already on that land with their own people.
I don't understand. Wait, who replaced who?
Well, this is what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what I've heard is that, you know, lack of a better word, the Jews buy land from absentee landlords, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so you buy the land, and now you want to create a community on that land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, by creating that community, by creating that community, you want as many Jewish people as possible to work the land,
Mm-hmm.
and so you specifically, mitigate the living and working and being on that land to other Jews, and so the Arabs who are already living there may have been displaced from the land that they were on for years once the Jews bought that land from them, and they may have seen it as they were being stolen from, but in actuality they abided by like the laws in that country and bought it fair and square.
I'm sure that there were instances when that happened. But this was not like universal or across the board. I mean, first of all, you're talking about a period of over 100 years, and there was lots of changes in terms of the borders, the demographics. Like, there was at various points in time, I'm sure that happened, but that happens. That's literally, you just described like real estate. Like that literally is what happens. Like
no,
everywhere.
I know, but when you have a culture where you were just a totally agricultural society, you were not well read. There was no education. Was at the bottom. The only laws that the only exposure to written word was through the Quran.
Yeah.
You may have not seen that. You may have said, we've been here for 500 years. All we want to do is farm the land, and now these people are throwing us off the land and telling us we can't be here. I could see how this could create certain radicalism while you were also being colonized by other people for hundreds of years too within that area. I'm just saying like that could have been another factor, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that there was some bad blood created when you have like a refugee population, which is what the Jews were, coming into a region that at that point in time was really a lot of swampland and a lot of there just wasn't a lot of infrastructure or anything like that. And you have a refugee population coming in, and they're building around certain ideals, certain principles that operate around their shared identity and their religion. I'm sure that there's going to be, local tribal skirmishes that are created, and there's going to be people that feel like they're being they're being sidelined, they're being kicked out and stuff like that.
And there was also the nationalism was very popular throughout the whole world at that time.
So popular.
Yeah,
it was called liberal nationalism.
Like nationalism was all over Europe, which is how World War I started, right? And so that ideology started taking hold in the Arab countries, especially since the colonialism that was already there was about to get totally dismantled. And because of that, many of the Arabs living in Palestine were like, hey, man, we don't want to share with these Jews. This is ours. We've been here for 500 years.
I think that's a little misleading.
No?
I think that's a little misleading. So there was a lot of Arabs that did want to share, and that really appreciated the coexistence because they appreciated the prosperity that Jews were bringing to the region.
Okay.
Again, remember, this was like a malaria-infested like swampland.
Oh, all right.
But what you had a very sinister character, and the fact that nobody knows his name just goes to show how ridiculous like our modern conversations about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is. His name was Hashemi al-Husseini.
Okay.
And he was appointed by the British in 1920 to be the Mufti of Jerusalem, which was essentially they didn't call him Palestinians back then, but he was basically the first like spiritual Palestinian Arab leader. They just called them Arab. Palestinians referred to Jews and to Arabs. Anyway, but the point is that he was a deeply, deeply, deeply fanatical Muslim. He was an extremist. He was an anti-Semite. He was a Nazi supporter. Hitler paid him to live in Germany in 1945 and broadcast in Arabic all of Hitler's speeches about Jews to the Middle East. And he became a very rich man. He had a whole entourage, and he orchestrated the massacres against Jews in 1929 and throughout the 30s, the Arab revolts. And in these hostile, really, really vicious, just slaughtering of Jewish villages and torturing and raping, just the worst things you can imagine. They also murdered Arabs that were like against what was going on and that wanted to live in coexistence with Jews. So basically, Hashemi al-Husseini and his posse, his gangs, they Nazified that region. That is why Palestinian Arab culture is so radical today, because they literally Nazified it. They brought in Hitler's ideas. They were paid by Hitler. He had one meeting with Hitler in 1941. Other than that, he was more in communication with like the second and third in command. But he was an attaché of the Nazis, and he used just the most brutal violence to essentially purge the region of any moderate Arabs that wanted to live in coexistence. And there are still streets named after this guy throughout like Judea and Samaria and Gaza. I mean, he's a hero in Palestinian Arab culture, and he was a monster. I mean, really, like just as evil, cruel as you can get.
Wow.
Yeah.
One last thing before we go. Do you think that the right of return laws are being potentially abused by certain bad people who do crimes against children to seek refuge in Israel? I don't have a cigarette.
Sorry. So the right of return, I think you're referring to something different. You're referring to the right to return, which is different than the right of return. The right of return refers to the Palestinians returning.
Oh, sorry, the
Israel.
right to return. Okay.
The right to return refers to laws that grant Jews citizenship kind of automatically. No, I mean, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, these laws exist in Israel just like they exist in France and just like they exist in Armenia and Spain and like any other country. Like if you are like, for example, like if you have French heritage and you want to go move to France and become a citizen, your citizenship will be fast tracked.
Yeah.
Because you have French citizenship. That is what Israeli law does for Jews.
So it's the same thing as every other country.
Same thing.
The reason I brought this up, I was watching a CBS news broadcast about how pedophiles in America were going into Israel to escape prosecution in Israel, and it seems as though the Israeli government or the police there could be doing a little bit of a better job to bring those people to justice.
They probably can.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's corruption in Israel like everywhere else. There's also, there's a lot of security issues that Israel has that no other country has to deal with. And they're a very, very tiny country. And contrary to what Owen Schroyer said, they have not expanded their borders under Netanyahu. They've actually shrunk. And at some parts of this country, it's only 9 miles wide, and they have incredible existential issues to contend with. And so there's a lot that Israel should be doing that does not involve like security that it's not doing. And there's probably a lot of stuff like this that falls through the cracks. And there's probably a lot of people in Israel that are very unhappy about it,
I can see that. What's up with the there was somebody who worked for Netanyahu. There was like a cybersecurity expert that got caught in a pedo sting in Las Vegas. Like, what happened with that?
I don't know. I haven't, I'm not your girl for that.
You can't? Okay.
Because I remember reading
on the
about
surface,
it,
that's
but
pretty
I didn't.
fucked up that he wasn't prosecuted in America when you're trying to solicit a child. Like, that's pretty bad. Like, I don't know. Like,
but like all this stuff, like it's this stuff with like pedophiles like fleeing to certain countries, like you'll just never hear about it unless it's Israel, and yet it happens all the time. Russia's like not Russia. There's like some Baltic country that's like a safe haven for pedophiles. I don't remember. Maybe like Estonia, Latvia. Like there's places that they go. I mean, like Denmark is like a safe haven for bestiality, like people who like having sex with animals. Like it's just like you only hear about this stuff if it's Israel.
Yeah, no Jews, no news. I got it. No, I mean, look, it makes sense, but you got to talk about it, right? You got to bring it up because it's
sure. I wish I knew more about the thing with Netanyahu.
You got to bring it up. You gotta
Alex Stein actually brought that up in my Tim Pool thing, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I haven't been paying attention to that news story. Like I just haven't. So
no, but somebody who is more in tune should talk about that.
Yeah.
Because on the surface, it is really bad.
Right.
It looks really bad.
But
like
there's
right.
But
really
all I'm saying is there's a microscope on Israel in ways that there's no microscope on other countries. And for the people who are like Tucker Carlson are like, well, of course we should focus on Israel because we're giving they get more aid from America than any other country. So obviously we care about Israel. Well, then how come there's a microscope on Israel in every other Western Europe country who doesn't give any money to Israel? Yeah. It's not just America.
It's also funny.
The whole world is obsessed with this one teeny
Israel
tiny
has
Jewish
like a much
state.
better life. People in Israel have a much better life than us when they pay like triple the taxes. Like it's kind of crazy. Like it is.
It's a hard place to live. I lived there for a year.
Yeah, the tax rate's
difficult
insane.
Place to
it's
live.
like you get taxed like by half of what you make, no matter who you are.
Didn't you want to talk about this aid to Israel?
Well, we got to go in a minute, but
oh man,
sure.
That would have been fun. We could do a whole episode on that.
We could do that for the follow up. There's going to probably be a lot more of these.
Okay.
But yeah, my general viewpoint is that we shouldn't be giving foreign aid to. We should be limiting the amount of foreign aid that we give to every single country.
I agree, but it's not aid what we give to Israel.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's
too,
the return on investment is upwards of like 200%.
Oh, that's good. But either way, my general viewpoint is that we shouldn't be giving foreign aid to anybody.
Yeah, if it's a blank check, I totally agree with
you.
We
shouldn't give foreign aid to anybody.
I
so
agree with
people say we should cut off aid to Israel. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, I don't think Israel needs our money to fuck these people up anyway and defend themselves. Cool.
Yeah, but it's not money that we give them. It's military credits. It's not even money. We don't give them $3.8 billion. We give them $3.8 billion in credits to buy weapons that we manufacture in America.
Okay, but you're still facilitating the military-industrial complex, which,
Well, completely, but you're actually saving like billions and billions of dollars in like R&D every single year, and you're actually improving our economy because you're creating a quantitative edge for America because
an economy based on war is not a
defense. I don't know. Like, I mean, defense is. I agree with you that there's a problem in terms of us having a bloated military-industrial complex, but things like America and exceptionalism do involve like us being on the cutting edge of things like, technology or medicine or, in environmentalism, whatever it is. And one of those categories is defense. And if we are on the cutting edge of defense, that boosts our economy. And in terms of like our setting on the global stage, like
it keeps us at number one, and it prevents us from defaulting on our debt, and it prevents us from having a full-blown currency crisis like what we had in Weimar Germany. And if something like that winds up happening, you sadly would get an Adolf Hitler type figure in charge.
Go.
So, the money's
there's
broke.
a lot.
The money's broken. Get as much Bitcoin as you can.
The thing about the aid is it's a lot more. That is something I would love to go on Owen Schroyer's show and talk about. Just this aid to Israel.
Talk
the
to him about
$3.8 billion aid package. I would love to talk to him about it.
Reach out. He'll probably have you on. Reach out. It'll probably be fun.
You could do an intro.
I'll do it. Reach out.
Okay.
Karys, how do we get a hold of you?
Well, I am active on X. Probably more active than you are at this point. My handle's
it's the state mental hospital. I'm taking a break.
Cesspool. At Rhea Karys, my last name and my first name. Just
how do you spell your last name so people know?
At RHEAKARYS.
No underscores, just
my last name and my first name. And that's really it, because other than that, I'm not really on social media. Like, I'm on Instagram, but it's private, and I don't really do political stuff on there.
Yeah.
It's just for travel and family and friends. And other than that, I don't really keep a public profile.
Generally speaking, politics are pretty gay and stupid, and if you get worked up over politics, you are gay and stupid as well. And not in the fabulous
don't
kind.
Get too
not in the not in the fabulous kind where, maybe you'll help like Vanessa get a wedding dress when we're ready to pop the question or whatever it is, or help me decorate the house. You're just fucking gay. Anyway, great having you on.
Good
we will obviously do this again.
Thanks for having me.